Tutorials, and welcome to tutorial number 20. So this is intermediate Java tutorial number 20. This is recursion and code reuse. Now, as I was talking about yesterday with the switches, it is very important to get as much code reuse as possible because it make your program a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to improve and comment and things like that. So going back to talking about recursion. So recursion here, as you see, similar to this student.java one that we did earlier. And of course, as you can see here, we could replace this guy with a switch, which we won't do right now, but you see how we have recursion possibilities here. So the add grade, so every time we do we could do something inside of here that says, you know, if you want to keep going, add grade. So it's very recursive, and here I believe it even calls to the next method. Oh, it doesn't call. Oh, it does. No, it doesn't. So recursion and code reuse is very important. That's what makes you a good programmer and makes you, if you're looking for a job in programming, makes you more competitive than other programmers that don't do it as well. All programmers do it, but some do it better than others, and the ones that do it better than others are the ones that are competitive. So you have these type of calculations. So what is recursion? Recursion is when you want to recall into something of a method like this. So you add a common used in your program code inside this method that you call back quite a bit, so that every time you call into there, you save that time of having to rewrite that code in another method. Now, the big thing that most people don't have is the insight to writing that. And the insight is that you can't have too much in there, because if you can't use the exact same thing. So for example, let's say I wanted one that doesn't have a B, that if it goes to a B, it does nothing. So that's a problem because this guy has a B in it, so I can't keep calling through it. Just like a similar project, like I said yesterday, I had one with switches, and I had two switches, and I combined them down to only one switch and allowed it to, and I basically just cut that switch down to where I only needed to add those 4 or 5 lines in the other switch to make it work. So for example, is if you're familiar with math, you have LCD, least common denominator. So for example, if you have you know, 3 12s, or you know, least common denominator is basically what you do to add things apart, but I'm talking more about you know, simplifying a fraction. But you could think of it both the same way. So in this case, you know, the smallest number would be 3. So you bring that down to, and I'm going to try to attach this logic. I don't know how well it's going to work, but let me see how good. So this here is a fraction, so it's 3 over 12. So in that case, you're reusing that 3 every time. So in this case, this is lines that you could have used, and this is lines that you're putting. So now you keep writing 12 lines each method when you could just be writing that 9, because you already have those 3 that are being used in a current one. So for example, just having a system.out print one where it prints all your grades in a separate method, that will save you almost 4 lines of code per each one. Or this part here, or this part here, you know. And that's where you know, you have to take your time when you plan out your programs, because you have to see that recursion before it happens. So take your time, sit down, write it down, do a flow chart, whatever you have to do to see that that type of recursion. I particularly like to write everything out first, get the program to work, and then start sorting it down, making it smaller and smaller and smaller. but it would be a lot quicker if I did that from the beginning and already knew what I was going to do, and was able to do the recursion. However, in most cases you're doing some sort of prototyping process, so you go through it and you're like, hey, I want to change this guy, make it look different, because the project I was doing had graphics in it, so and I was doing it for someone else, so they're like, hey, let's do this, and I'm like, alright, so I have to change this around. And then when I finally got to the finished, it being set in stone, what we're gonna do here, I did all the recursions, set all of the recursive calls that I could just have put in a method, and got rid of 2 switches, turned 2 switches into 1 switch, and got rid of almost 120 lines. It was a 350 line program, and then when I did the recursion, I got it down to 120 lines. And it brought down the difficulty to read it way down. It was a lot easier to read. So make sure you reuse your code. I mean, if you every program that you ever make, save it. So for example here, as you see, I have these open because now I could go back into any of these and pull a snippet of code out and put it into my new program. So that's another thing. I mean, be smart about it. Save your programs, save all the programs that we've done. Not really in this test one, this kind of crap, because it's just random stuff in there. But every time that you need to write your code again, you're wasting time, because you already wrote it sometime, and you could have just pulled something like this and put it into your new one and just be working with that. Also, like you see, definitely write comments. That's another thing. But so it's kind of really hard to explain how recursion works, but this right here in student is basically what it looks like in a nutshell. This is what even on my project it looked like. It was right here, and this one was called switch. I called the method like switch test or something like that, and then it just kept going in. And then I had one, I was basically doing a next and a back button. So the next button incremented a counter and the back button decremented a counter. So I can't have this in there, because this will automatically plus it and then it'll minus it for the back button, and you'll get nowhere. So you just get rid of this and then start another method that says add or next and back. So next you call the switch here, and then it increments it, and then the back decrements it. So for example, let's say here, let's do a little bit. Let's say void, we're going to call this check grade. We're going to call this void add grade. Void subtract grade. Now let's say there that we wanted to do that, and then we'll say C minus mine, and you do count minus or total grades minus, and then you do total grades plus. Now you could get rid of this guy and do whatever you want to do, and you'd call this guy first, and then when it leaves, it increments, right? This is recursion. So here we would get rid of the total grades here, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Or you could do an outside control loop to where you pass something into here that says whether you're incrementing or decrementing the particular one. So you would say string subtract or string add, and then it says if string equals contract minus. and then in here it would do a minus minus if this is true and if that's true. So, and I'll be doing it a lot with. We're gonna go into another program here coming up, the famous blackjack game. We're gonna make a console blackjack game, and that's where I'm gonna do a lot of the practice for recursion, and that's where a lot of that is going to become very, very important, because you need to get those calls down and to really clean up your program in order to follow what you're doing there. Alright, so this has been Steven from LegitTechTutorials, and I would like to thank you for watching. You know, tried to make sense of what recursion looks like. We'll get a lot of practice in on this, because this is very, very important. And you'll need to get very, very good at it, and I'll even need to get better at it, because that's mainly what you're practicing. You're not really practicing the language anymore at the point that I'm at. You're just practicing the style and learning more libraries and stuff like that, but we'll get into that when we get into the advanced portion of the tutorials. So it's been tutorial number 20 for intermediate Java, which is called recursion, and we'll be getting close to some graphical stuff and a blackjack game. I'd like to thank you for watching, and subscribe for my series, and stay tuned for my next video in this series or my other series. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.